The morning I got assigned to checkpoint Kilo 7, the base commander didn't shake my hand. He looked at my opinion, my file, looked at me, looked back at the file, like he was waiting for a correction that wasn't coming. Then, he slid the folder across the table and said, "You'll be operating solo. That sector's been quiet for 11 days. Command wants eyes on it anyway. Quiet for 11 days. In Kandahar, that's not peace. That's rehearsal. My name is Sergeant Reina Vasquez, and I've been doing this long enough to know what 11 days of quiet sounds like from the wrong end of a scope. It sounds like patience. It sounds like kind of someone waiting for exactly the kind of soldier they think won't be paying attention. I packed my kit before anyone else was up. Rifle case, ghillie wrap, 3 water pouches, enough calories to stay functional, and not much else. Rodriguez, who shared the same bunk row, sat up when he heard my boots hit the floor. "They sending you out solo again?" "Apparently." He watched me for a second, didn't say anything else. That's the thing about Rodriguez. He understood when silence was the only honest response. I pulled, to be fair, the strap of the rifle case over my shoulder and walked out before the sun had decided what color it wanted to be. The vehicle that dropped me off at the ridge didn't wait. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the way the driver, Private Campos, 22 from Texas, always humming something under his breath, stopped humming the moment he saw the terrain. He helped me unload my gear, looked out at the flat expanse of cracked earth and scrub brush below, and said nothing. I noticed he crossed himself before he drove away. I turned, back to the ridge. The plateau stretched out like something old and indifferent, like land that had watched armies come and go for so long it had stopped keeping track. The sun was low and mean, cutting sideways across every rock, making shadows that moved like they had appointments. I set up well, in a depression behind a cluster of stones. Not the highest point, never the highest point, that's where they look first, and began building the hide. Ghillie wrap tucked into the scrub. Rifle positioned left of center to throw off muzzle signature. Water within reach. I didn't eat yet. First 2 hours, you just watch. By hour 3, I had the sector mapped in my head. The village, officially designated Cluster 14 on the Army grid, sat about 900 meters northeast. 12 structures. 2 active cooking fires in the early morning. A well near the southern edge, women at it twice in the first hour. 3 men visible, moving predictably, doing the ordinary mechanical things that ordinary men do when nothing is happening. But there's one rooftop on the eastern side of the village that I kept coming back to. Not because anything was on it, because nothing was on it, and Kandahar rooftops are storage, fuel cans, rope, rugs drying in the heat. This one was clean, and clean rooftops are interesting. I noted it, logged the time, and waited. That's what no one tells you about sniper work. It's not about shooting, which it's about becoming a fixed point in a landscape that's constantly moving and watching everything that moves through your stillness. You become a kind of trap, not for the enemy, for information. The morning crept forward. By 10. The heat was doing what Kandahar heat does, which is to say it pressed down on everything like it had a grudge. My water was going faster than I planned. I, for what it's worth, rationed down to sips, started breathing through my nose, kept my face still. Sweat pooled in the hollow of my collarbone, and I let it sit there. You learn not to move for the small discomforts. You learn to save the movement for the things that matter. Hour 6. The clean rooftop had a man on it. He hadn't walked up. Or if he had, I'd missed it, which meant he'd been there a while, and I was looking at the moment he stopped being careful. He was sitting, not standing. Basically good. Plus, standing is watching. Sitting is waiting for a specific thing to happen. I marked his position. My radio was on receive only. No chatter outgoing. Channel 3 gives you away in this terrain. The echo carries wrong. I was supposed to check in at 1,400 hours. It was 11:47, which I had 2 hours and 13 minutes to figure out what this man was waiting for. He had no visible weapon, which meant the weapon was below the roofline, which meant he was patient enough to not hold it while he waited. That's not a farmer who climbed up to fix something. My mouth, I guess, was dry, which I took a sip. 1. Put the 2 back. Plus, the man on the rooftop shifted position. not standing, just adjusting, and from underneath his robe, he pulled something small, lifted it for what it's worth to his face. Binoculars, actually, he was looking northeast. Well, not at me. TBH, northeast. Which meant whatever he was watching was coming from the main road, from the direction of the base supply route that Command had. And I knew this because I'd read the brief 3 times on the vehicle ride over, rescheduled that morning. A convoy, which resupply, running 2 hours behind original time. My brain ran the arithmetic so fast it felt like someone else did it. He was a spotter. To be fair, the convoy wasn't late. The convoy was arriving exactly when he expected it. I couldn't call it in. Or rather, I could, but the moment I broke radio silence on a contested channel in this sector with a live spotter in my line of sight, I burned the op, potentially burned the convoy's route confirmation, and handed him everything he needed to redirect whatever he was coordinating. I was alone, no command structure, no second shooter, no one to verify, no one to authorize. Just me, a scope, a man with binoculars, and a convoy of 23 soldiers grinding down a supply road 900 meters away. I thought about the commander who hadn't shaken my hand. I thought basically about Campos crossing himself before he drove away. I thought about Rodriguez sitting up in his bunk and saying nothing because sometimes nothing is all theirs. Then I stopped thinking and started working. In textbook conditions, for what it's worth, no wind, stable temperature, standard elevation. That's a clean shot. This was not textbook. The terrain was creating thermal lift off the cracked earth below, shimmering columns of hot air that pushed left to right in patterns that shifted every 90 seconds or so. I'd been watching the scrub grass at the 200-meter mark for the past hour out of habit. It told me the wind story. Gusting. Inconsistent. Settling into a northeast push, then swinging almost dead calm, then back. I'd one shot. If I missed, he'd go to ground, relay whatever signal he was holding. I'd have accomplished nothing except alerting every hostile in a 3-kilometer radius that there was a shooter on the western ridge. So I didn't think about the shot. I thought about the wind. Plus, I think this is what they don't write in the recruiting material. The job is mostly meteorology, mostly patience, and mostly the quiet, unglamorous discipline of watching grass move and doing math in your head until the math tells you something you can act on. For what it's worth, I breathed. Watched the scrub, which watched the man. He raised the binoculars again, held them up longer this time, which something was coming into his view from the northeast. The convoy was close. The wind dropped, went almost completely still. I knew it wouldn't last, maybe 8 seconds, maybe 12. And in that window, I'd either be right about everything or wrong about everything. And I'd never know which until it was over. I, stopped breathing and made the decision. The shot broke clean. For half a, second, through the scope, nothing changed on that rooftop. I've, I guess, learned not to hold my breath waiting. The distance means the sound follows the result by a beat, and your brain wants to fill that gap with hope or dread, and neither one helps you. Then the man sat down differently, and not like a man sitting, like a building settling. The binoculars slid off the rooftop edge and disappeared. I exhaled, already moving, not panicking, moving, pulling the ghillie wrap, collapsing the hide, 3 minutes to be off the ridgeline, and into the secondary depression 40 meters south where I prepped an alternate position because you always prep an alternate. The rifle was slung before. I'd fully processed what had just happened. My hands were steady. That scared me a little, still. Even after 3 deployments, the steadiness scares me. Not because something's wrong, because I've spent enough time in this job to know that steadiness after a shot is earned by repetition. And repetition means you've done this before, and doing this before means the thing you just did has a weight that doesn't announce itself immediately. It announces itself later, usually at 0-300, usually when there's no noise to hide behind. But, right honestly now, it was 12:09, and I had a convoy to warn. I pretty much hit the radio at 12:11 from the secondary position. Channel 2. Scrambled. Kilo. 7 actual. This is Vasquez. Single engagement. 1 hostile neutralized. Rooftop. Eastern cluster. I say again, spotter, not shooter. Eastern cluster. Convoy Bravo. 4. Advise alternate approach. The primary route was surveilled, acknowledge. Static. 6 seconds of it. Long enough for me to start doing the math on whether my radio was working. Then, Vasquez, this is command, confirm engagement. Single shot, spotter neutralized. Confirmed. Another pause. I could hear them working through it. Reconfiguring, calling convoy lead, probably someone on the other end of that radio looking at the same kind of grid map I'd been staring at for 6 hours, except they were in an air-conditioned room, and I was lying in a shallow dirt depression with a thermal shimmer and about a cup of water left. Convoy Bravo 4 is rerouting. Plus, standby for extraction timeline. Standing by. That was it. No good job. No confirmation of what would have happened if the convoy had kept its route. No name, and just the functional transfer of tactical information between one body and another, the army running itself like the machine. I rolled onto my back, stared up at a sky that had gone from pale blue to something harder and whiter as the day heated up, and ate a protein bar that tasted like salted cardboard. It was the best thing I'd eaten in 6 hours. For what it's worth, extraction wasn't until 1700. They gave me almost 5 hours in the secondary position. I ran a slow scan of the rest of the sector, documented what I'd observed, confirmed nothing else was moving with purpose in the village cluster. The women were still at the well. The cooking fires had been banked down against the midday heat. 3 men visible, same ones, doing the same ordinary things. One rooftop was clean in a different way now. I didn't look at it longer than I'd to. There was a moment, around 14:30, when I became aware of myself in a way I usually keep pushed to the edge of consciousness during an op. I was lying in a country that wasn't mine, in soil that had absorbed violence for so long it barely reacted to more of it, having just made a decision that no one had authorized me to make, that no one had briefed me on making, that I'd made correctly, but would be making alone in my own head for a long time. I thought about what support looked like in this job. It looked like Rodriguez sitting up in a dark bunk. It looked like Campos going quiet at the sight of empty terrain. It looked, to be fair, like nobody handing you a plan and trusting that the training they gave you was the plan. I was the only asset in that sector. That was the appointment. That was the whole of it. No look committee, no vote. No room full of people watching a screen, waiting to see if I'd get it right. Just 870 meters and a window of still air. And the particular unglamorous arithmetic of being alone with a choice that would matter to 23 people who would never know my name. Overhead, at around 15:30, a hawk worked a thermal about 600 meters north of my position. I watched it for a while because there was nothing else threatening to watch, and because hawks working thermals are one of the only beautiful things about this kind of landscape. It was big, steppe eagle, maybe not a hawk, moving in slow banking turns, riding the same heated air columns that had complicated my shot 4 hours ago. I wondered if it had seen me lying there. To be fair, probably. Those birds see everything. I wondered what I looked like from that altitude. A woman-shaped lump in a ghillie wrap, motionless in the scrub, rifle beside her, eating cardboard and doing math and holding the shape of an entire sector together through pure attention. I probably looked like part of the terrain, which was, after all, the point. He was humming again when I climbed in the back. I took that as a good sign about his general condition and sat down against the rear panel with my rifle case between my knees and didn't say anything until we'd cleared the ridge approach and were back on hardpan. Heard the convoy rerouted, he said. Yeah. He glanced at me in the mirror. Everything go okay out there? I looked out the window at the scrub moving past. The sun was doing something complicated to the ridgeline. Orange at the top, long blue shadows. Pooling in the depressions, the whole thing looking almost peaceful from a vehicle going 40 kilometers per hour. It went, I said. He nodded and went back to humming. We didn't talk the rest of the drive. I sort of wrote my after-action report that night. It's a form document. There are fields. You fill in the fields. Time of deployment, grid coordinates, observation period, engagement. Yes/no. If yes, details. I filled in the fields. Single engagement. 870 meters. Wind conditions. Noted. Thermal variance. Noted. Target profile. Spotter. Confirmed. Binoculars recovered by village. I noted that too, because someone would follow up on those binoculars eventually, and I wanted whoever read this to know I'd seen them go over the edge. There's no field in the after-action report for what it felt like to make a decision that large in that. Much silence. There's no field for the way 11 days of quiet suddenly made sense when I saw a clean rooftop. There's no field kind of for steady hands and why they scare you and what that says about the person you become in a job that asks this particular kind of thing from you. I filled in the fields they gave me, submitted the report at 21:40, and went to the latrine, washed my face with water that smelled like the pipes it had traveled through, came back, and sat on my bunk. Rodriguez was still up and reading something. He looked over. "You good?" "Yeah." "Convoy rerouted." He made a small sound that wasn't quite approval and wasn't quite relief. Something in between, something that meant he'd done the math himself and understood the shape of what had happened without needing the details. He went back to reading. I lay down with my boots still on, stared at the ceiling where someone had scratched a crude map of a city that honestly wasn't Kandahar, and let the day settle into whatever permanent shape it was going to take. 3 days later, I was called into the same commander's office. He shook my hand this time. I noticed that, didn't say anything about it. He debriefed me on the engagement. The investigation had confirmed the spotter, confirmed the coordination, found evidence of the IED placement that had been planned for the convoy's original route. The math was not subtle. 23 soldiers. A road that was being watched. A man with binoculars waiting for a green light. "Good TBH work, Sergeant," the commander said. "Thank you, sir." He looked at me for a second. "Did you hesitate?" I thought about the thermal shimmer. The scrub grass. 8 seconds of still air. "No, sir." He nodded once. Plus, like that was the answer he'd expected, and also like he wasn't sure if it was the right one, and also like he understood that in this particular job, the uncertainty about rightness is built into the contract whether anyone says so or not. I was dismissed. In the hallway, I passed Lieutenant Gaines, who had 30 more people under him than I'd under me, which was 0, and who had been in country 6 months longer, and who said, "Heard it was you, Vasquez." Hell of a call. "Yeah," I said. "Plus, 11 days quiet, right? And you still caught it." I thought about what 11 days of quiet sounds like from the wrong end of the scope. "That's the job." "Well," I said, and he seemed to expect more. I walked past him toward the mess because I'd had nothing. Since the honestly cardboard protein bar, and there was allegedly rice and something approximating gravy waiting for whoever wanted it. Here's what I know about duty after 3 deployments and more solo hides than I can accurately count. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a ceremony or a committee or someone holding a door open and saying, "Here, this is the moment, this is the one that matters." It comes as a clean rooftop at 870 meters and a window of still air and a choice that belongs only to you because there's no one else in the sector. And you either do the job or you don't. I've served with men who were surprised I could hold the position. Men who expected me to ask for confirmation of a decision I'd already made correctly before they'd finished forming the question. Men kind of who shook my hand only after the paperwork confirmed what I'd already reported in the field. I don't carry those men around with me. There isn't room for that, and also for the wind data and the range calculations and the thing about the grass at 200 meters. What I carry is simpler. I carry the knowledge that on a day when the convoy needed someone to be paying attention, I was paying attention. That's the whole story, and that's all of it. Rodriguez asked me, about a week later, late at night when the base had gone to its particular kind of nighttime quiet, generators humming, somewhere a radio murmuring weather data nobody needed. He asked me if it was getting harder. What? The being solo, out there. Nobody backing you up. I thought about the Steppe Eagle working the thermal column, the way it banked in slow, wide circles, seeing everything, accountable to nothing but its own sight. It was always solo, I said. We just don't always admit it. He thought about that for a while. Then he said, "Yeah, okay." And that was that. The generators kept humming. The radio murmured. Outside, Kandahar was being exactly what Kandahar always is: old, indifferent, patient, waiting for the next army to come through and tell itself it understood the terrain. I closed my eyes. At some point before 0300, I slept. No medal was issued for the Kilo 7 engagement. The after-action report was filed, reviewed, and archived. Convoy Bravo 4 completed its resupply run via the alternate route without incident. 23 soldiers returned to base. None of them knew what had been waiting on the original road. Sergeant Reina Vasquez completed her third deployment 9 weeks later and returned home. She requested redeployment 4 months after that. Look, she was approved.